Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com, and this episode is a news roundup. It's the first one we've done in a while, and as usual with a roundup, I am joined by our assistant editor, Eamon McCarthy-Earls. Eamon, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. Pleased to be joining you.
Yeah, it's good to do another one of these, and we have quite a few weeks of headlines to catch up on. We're going to be a bit picky, but try to pick some of the highlights for our listeners here. Let's jump right into it. What do we have first?
Well, one of the first pieces that we had was a recent news item about the general manager for Dynamics 365, Muhamed Alam, who's working to expand leadership for all Dynamics 365 operations solutions. And I know that's something that you had a chance to cover just a few weeks back.
Yeah, this announcement went hand in hand with, it seemed anyway, the decision of Marko Perisic to depart Microsoft. He went off to another opportunity in the HR software space. And as part of that announcement, he and Muhamed also told partners essentially that Muhamed now has sort of an oversight or sort of a higher level management role where he won't be running the R&D directly, I don't think, for Business Central, the way Marko was sort of that general manager. There will be a new GM coming in with a similar or the same role as what Marko had apparently, but he now extends his oversight, so he will be responsible for Business Central, the finance and operations product, commerce solutions, which is an area where Microsoft certainly could do a lot more, and PSA, or professional service automation, and that's an area that actually I thought was one of the most interesting. It spans both capabilities on the finance and operations side and a whole module on the customer experience side. And I actually was able to sneak a question into Muhamed at a Q&A session he was doing about his new role. And it didn't really, what I was able to learn was that the PSA oversight is going to continue to be on both sides for now. But I think certainly there are more scenarios where they could do even more there's already some integration between the two, but they're certainly, I think, looking to do more, or looking perhaps to do, to take that story to the next level. And I think having one person overseeing it is certainly a good thing in that regard. I'm not really sure how it was managed before, but I assume since part of it was on the customer engagement side, it wasn't Alam's purview at that point. So anyway, yeah, that's a fairly significant leadership change, and I think we're still awaiting any sort of word on who will be replacing Marko Perisic. There was just an event last week for NAB developers called NAB Tech Days, and other R&D managers got up and spoke at the keynote at that event. I'm not sure that signaled anything about those leadership decisions. They certainly, I hadn't picked up on it anywhere. I think a decision is still pending on sort of who will be a new GM for Business Central.
Another bit of interesting news recently has actually come from MVP Steve Mordew, who's been a frequent guest on the MSDW podcast in the past, including a very recent episode. And both in the recent episode and his chance of talking with us recently, he talked about changes in Microsoft's business application group's ISV game plan, and sort of some of the stuff that he saw revealed at the Partner Advisory Council, or PAC meeting, not long ago.
Yeah, if you've ever talked to Steve, I mean, he is a real fan of being involved in the Partner Advisory Council. It's something where I think he says he learns a lot, and I think he encourages other partners to try to get involved in it. A lot of the information they do share is NDA, but one thing he was able to share, and I just sort of read about through him, was another sort of leadership decision, I guess you would say, at Microsoft. Steve Guggenheimer is going to be taking a leadership role in fixing, adjusting, improving AppSource, however you want to. I think different people have different perspectives on what's needed there. And I don't know if you've ever heard any partners comment on this, Eamon, but you hear a lot of negatives about what AppSource is today. You hear a few people. I've heard some people love it. They think they say they've had great results from posting on it and from generating leads from it. But larger set of voices I hear is that it just hasn't lived up to its potential yet, and companies have either given up at this point or are just very, very frustrated.
I've certainly heard very similar things that I know in the recent podcast episode with Mark Smith and Steve Mordew. They both described it in terms of having a lot of dead wood, and Steve had a funny quip about basically AppSource needing an enema to clean out some of this unmaintained software and IP on there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, and they made the point, like you said, that if they stripped out everything, this might be the time to do it. Even if there's a lot of dead wood in there, let's get it out and sort of regroup the site now, rather than, and just sort of tear the Band-Aid off, so to speak, rather than wait and let it sort of sit there for too much longer with content that's not relevant anymore.
Certainly one of the other new things that we've seen recently is just a growing emphasis from Microsoft that D365 Business Central will be componentized moving forward, and essentially open source in many respects, with the shift to the AL language that the R&D team is working on right now. And Microsoft, I know, has said that Business Central will be constructed entirely of extensions other than the platform, and then sort of a thin system of applications. And they've been sort of modifying their approach from the era of nav as we move forward into the D365 age.
Yeah, so this was, it was funny when I was catching up on keynote of the NAV Tech Days event I mentioned earlier that the team posted to YouTube, and I was watching it, and I saw some of these descriptions, and I got excited. I thought, wow, they're formalizing this. That's really that's great. That's such a big deal. And then I thought, I mean, it's really inside baseball in the sense that that's a bad analogy, since this was almost a very international event, and most of the people don't play baseball. But the sharing that was done about those plans by Microsoft to the Antwerp-based event was really about some of these details of how the architecture is going to change over time. And I was thinking, well, partners, that is a big deal, but if you're a customer, if you're a prospect, if you're a future ERP buyer, I don't think this matters all that much to you, other than maybe just the ability for partners to kind of give you in the future, when this is all sort of settled, perhaps a better story, a better value proposition, a better way of deploying a solution that meets your needs. So in that sense, it might make Business Central a better product, but not in a way that I think most customers will really care about. I think for ISVs and for partners and for just developers in the nav space, it will be a big deal, but it will be phased in over time. I mean, the idea of I thought it was great. They shared some sort of very simple diagrams that I could understand. I always find the nav technical architecture very confusing as a non-nav developer, but sort of the stack that they created with and the evolution from like one big extension, and then having a foundation with a main extension, and then sort of slowly breaking it up into smaller chunks until finally you have something where you can actually just swap out partner-based extensions for standard extensions. I mean, it's a pretty cool model. Again, I don't think customers will care all that much, but it could really make it into, I think the takeaway is that it really could start to look like a business application platform rather than a monolithic ERP solution sometime in the future. And that's something Microsoft doesn't have right now. And I don't know that, I don't know exactly what it will mean, whether it'll entice a lot of new companies to start up solutions on the Business Central model, or whether it'll just kind of keep existing ISVs in the game. But I think it's years in the making still. There's Microsoft also advised that by the time they get to that full vision, it could be 5 to 10 years down the line. But it's not disruptive either, I don't think. So I don't think anyone's worried about that. But yeah, that's what it is. And I think Microsoft had forecast that this was coming, but this was the first time they showed the little diagrams, and they sort of said it outright that this is the direction that they're headed in. So that's what caught my eye about it, and I think it says a lot about sort of the future of Business Central. And I think it's nice that they're forecasting 5 years out. I mean, that sounds like a long time, but on the other hand, partners are always saying they want more direction on where things are headed. So there you go. There's where things are headed.
Well, in the short shorter run, one of the things we had a chance to speak with a partner about last week was sort of the changes that D365 is bringing for smaller partner businesses. I had a chance to speak on Friday of last week with Felix Robitaille, a bilingual professional from Montreal, Canada, and CEO of XRM Vision, about how his small business is sort of reacting to the changes. They're definitely trying to come up with more prepackaged offerings based on D365. They're very, very interested in the Power Platform, Power Apps Flow, and Power BI, and how that can change things. And they're adapting to the way that the Common Data Service, in other words, CDS, has been changing sort of their approach to managing data. And they're actually busily gearing up right now for the Extreme 365 event and trying to get a grip on all these shifts happening so that they can adapt within their small team.
Yeah, this goes back to the same idea that we touched on earlier, which is sort of where partners can, and we should mention, as opposed to the previous sort of bit we were talking about, it was related to Business Central. I think for Felix's XRM Vision company, they're really focused, I believe, on customer engagement apps, but it's really not all that different of a story, and it does go back to this topic of what's Microsoft doing to improve the sort of the ability of partners to engage and use Microsoft as a resource or as an engine to drive the sales of their own solutions and their own services. So you certainly see that sort of reflected, I think, in some of the things that he's talking about, and and going back to, again, the podcast with Steve Mordew and Mark Smith. I mean, the idea of building out your business around some of these platform capabilities that Microsoft is pushing out. I imagine that's a topic that with this Extreme event coming up and others going into 2019, you'll keep hearing partners sort of talk about that and work to figure out the right way to approach it.
You mentioned a little while ago the departure of Marko Perisic from the Microsoft team, and you actually had a chance to do an interview with him for the MSDW podcast just a few days after he left the Microsoft team for good.
Yeah, that was a real treat. I called it a bit of an exit interview. He was, I think it was one of the last things he was doing as he was sort of parting ways with the company, if not officially, then sort of ending his daily duties, and had completed the most of the transition. I think he was primarily just going to stay engaged, to answer questions, to do handover stuff, and I think to some extent to assist in the search for his replacement, both inside Microsoft and outside Microsoft. And he expressed a lot of gratitude to the community, first and foremost, in talking to him. I think he was very much at peace with the decision, in the sense that he had he had overseen Business Central to a point where it was kind of at a logical place for someone else to kind of take over if that was going to happen. And you can sort of see that with some of these plans that are going on now. I think this, again, not that customers will necessarily care so much, but the fact that the product is at the point where they're starting to transition it or translate it into extensions on the platform side of it, means that a whole new effort's starting up, and probably a good time. It also was a nice insight into how someone builds up their sort of stature, I guess you would say, at Microsoft. I mean, he's clearly someone with a strong voice and has a bit of a swagger to him. He said one of the things that surprised him in sort of the departing, as he was getting ready to depart, I think maybe they had a party for him or some kind of a little going away ceremony, and people noted that he was really overconfident when he came off as very overconfident when he first joined the company, and and I think he was a little surprised by that characterization, but I think I know what people were saying, because he certainly has a confidence and a sort of a no nonsense sort of voice to him when he talks about some of the challenges that he just wants to get in there, fix problems, listen, take care of business, do what needs to be done, in a sense. And then on the other side of it, sort of talking about some of the mentoring that he received joining Microsoft, some of the skills he developed from being there, coming out of sort of smaller businesses and entrepreneurial efforts before that. So it was a nice little insight into what it was like to join Microsoft as a software guy and sort of develop your career there. He was there for 12 years, and I think he said he never expected he would spend that long at the company.
Well, throughout the past few weeks, we've had a lot of great expert content as well. Recently, we just published the first part of a 2-part series about embedded analytics and embedded Power BI, written by Gina Pavelan. We've had a number of sort of short but very useful quick hits from some contributors in India, including Kuldeep Gupta, writing about Dynamics 365 project service automation and all the little how-tos and gotchas to avoid with that. A few other pieces of expert content that have really stood out to me recently that very much tie in with the news we've been talking about. One is a sort of 2-part series from Stefano Demiliani that looks into sort of the changes brought by Business Central, particularly the shift from C-side and C/AL to the VS Code AL model that's going to be the sort of future of that whole platform, the move from Windows Client to the Windows Web Client, and different ways for partners and ISVs to think about shifting their solutions to extensions. And we've also sort of inaugurated the first part of a very exciting series that we'll be having coming out in the next few months called Finance Where I'm From, which takes a look at basically the unique considerations with using Dynamics products for the financial and legal requirements of different countries. And Dr. Ludwig Reinhard, an expert on Dynamics 365 and Dynamics AX from Germany, wrote the very first installment of this series, taking a look at payment systems, VAT, and data export sort of considerations within Germany.
Yeah, that was really an excellent 2-part article there, and I feel really grateful for Ludwig for writing that for us. It was really exactly what I was hoping to learn. It was really for me a learning experience too. I'm interested to sort of get some expert tips on what those or explanation, I should say, not tips, of what some of those distinguishing characteristics are. I've always heard them from time to time, and I know that ISVs are often building such capabilities into the various products to handle some of these needs, and Microsoft does too, to an extent with localizations, but I don't know. I always just enjoyed sort of hearing how people do business in different parts of the world using, the same starting point, which would be one of the Dynamics ERPs. So yeah, it was really an outstanding job there from him, and I look forward to some others, over the next weeks and months. I think we have quite a few countries potentially positioned here as potential follow-up articles, right?
At this point, we have the United States, the UK, Egypt, and I hope we'll have some others very soon as well. I think we may also have Canada in the works, potentially.
And it is going to, I think the intention is also it's not just going to be finance and operations. We're going to be looking at GP, at NAV as well, perhaps. So NAV/Business Central, I hope. So, really a good variety to come, hopefully. All right. Well, Eamon, what do you have planned in the future here?
Well, one of the things I'm certainly very excited for is the next installation of Gina Pavelan's 2-part series on embedded analytics, which we should have out in the next few days. Beyond that, I'm very excited to see what the next installation of the Finance Where I'm From series is going to be. We've touched on a few of them, and I hope we'll have some coming out in December. So I'm very excited for all of that, and I'm sure there's other things in the pipeline as we head into the new year.
Yeah, on my side, I actually have, I'm not sure exactly why it is, but we have several things related to hiring and professional development that are sort of in the pipeline at various stages right now. Another is, we're just about to cross into December here as we record this, and I'm starting to look back at sort of best of the year candidates for top news articles, top contributed content. So it's always kind of tough to choose, but that's one of the things that always I start thinking about going into December. Eamon, thanks for joining me today. It's been fun to catch up. We'll have to do it again a couple weeks down the road and see what else has popped up in the Dynamics space.
Sounds great, Jason. Thank you very much.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Eamon for joining me today. If you have any feedback, send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.